Hi. I just felt a need to share this again to highlight to people as a voice from the ground, as it were. This voter purging that's happened in America, it is a really, really serious development, and it totally undermines the concept of America being a democratic nation that follows a constitution. So, you know, the constitution is in the bin because it's on hold, isn't it? America's been in a state of emergency since 9/11, since the laws of physics took a day off. America's been on a state of emergency, so they can ignore the constitution. You see, that gives them powers to ignore the constitution because, well, apparently no, the laws of physics didn't take a day off. It was Muslims. It was Muslims. Except we know that it's got nothing to do with Islam. It's got everything to do with a global criminal cabal and their evil false flag events that do kill people, lives sacrificed for their own purposes. It was a huge sacrifice. 9/11 was a huge sacrifice in order to up the ante and to fund the horrific invasion of Iraq and then later Libya and now the attacks on Syria, and to keep up presence in Afghanistan. So, you know, the people at home, keep them subjugated in America. Make sure that the voters are predominantly upper middle class, you know, that their voice is going to be heard. This far right extremist factions among them, and obviously the very richest people of America and those who aspire for that kind of wealth, who believe in their nightmare that is the American dream, which is basically the Wild West. It's survival of the fittest, okay? And those who get wealth and power, that's because they're fit and strong, and those who don't get it, well, that's because they're weak, and they're constantly playing the victim, okay? They're the losers, that loser mentality. That's why they're poor. They've got a loser mentality. As if a loser mentality isn't dumped on some people simply because of their race or their class or their faith. And what Greg Palast, his film, which I did buy a copy of his video, which was, I mean, it's just terrible, really. I mean, you are talking over 1 million American citizens wrongfully denied their right to vote. Probably more than that. And when you think that in each state it was just a few thousand votes swaying one between the other, that is a really serious thing. I mean, to me, it was very serious that America had the choice of a psychopath, covert narcissist, and a psychopath, overt narcissist as choice to be their president. You know, we couldn't have really expected any less from Hillary Clinton than what Donald Trump's done, though probably not as brash and brazen as himself. But nonetheless, you know, there's no denying it. Hillary Clinton is a psychopath. That's the fact of it. So, you know, the Democratic Party has been usurped and in control of the same fascists that controls Trump for a very long time. You know, this illusion of left-right politics, of, you know, one side socialism, the other side capitalism, it really does need to be abandoned, because all politicians, no matter who they are, really all need to stand by the Constitution, don't they? That is their job, ultimate job. Can this person uphold the Constitution? Well, Trump isn't upholding the Constitution. He's upholding a state of emergency. And who is the state of emergency on behalf of? Protecting a load of criminals from rightful investigations and likely prosecutions for their crimes against America and humanity. And because those criminals have been allowed to get away with their crimes to date, then obviously they will give themselves more and more powers. And the first thing they've done is remove people's rights to vote. And a lot of poor American citizens, and especially the black poor American citizens, who can't afford ID and all these things that they've got to have in order to vote, so they're just cut off. Anybody homeless, they're cut off. Anybody who's committed an offence isn't allowed to vote, okay, in some states. So what does that mean then? You look at the black population, look at the prisons, there's a disproportionate, you know, I think the prisons are something like 75% black Americans, when black Americans make up only, what, 35% at most of the American population. So how is it that 75%, they form 75% of prisoners, and they only have to get one, you know, commit one crime, half of them, you know, very minor crimes that white people don't even get imprisoned for, a lot of them doing life imprisonment on this disgusting, despicable third strike thing. You know, 3 offences, criminal offences you're convicted of, oh, it's life imprisonment. I mean, what kind of nation would tolerate that? What kind of nation would tolerate that? Except a nation that's top heavy with psychopaths. And, you know, now there's been this Ohio Supreme Court has ruled that voter purging is not illegal. It's not illegal, apparently. It's not illegal to remove somebody's name from the electoral register simply because somebody else in another city, another state of America, has the same name. And, you know, the fact of it is that a lot of, you know, people of colour in America, like the Hispanic people, they have similar second names. The same with black people, they have similar surnames. Because they were names that they've had to take, or that they were given by their plantation owners. And that is what they're doing, that's what they're doing. They're saying, no, this person's got the same name as that person in another state, so, you know, cross that person's name off. And they do target mostly people of colour and people in the what's considered the lower class areas. And so that is a way then of just, well, it's undermining the democratic process, and therefore the Ohio Supreme Court now is part of the tyranny. That is what that means, that the Supreme Court itself has ruled against the American Constitution. That is what it means. It really has. It really has. It's ruled against the American Constitution. Because what Greg Palast exposes in his video about this voter purging and the way that the election was swung through this voter purging, that is very, very, very serious. It's a very serious matter when the public are denied their right to democracy, to true democracy. That is a deadly serious issue, because the whole idea of the American Constitution, the original intent, is to give people their basic rights and freedoms, isn't it? And that does include the rights to freely elect one's leaders. On the strength of what? On the strength of their ability to lead, on the strength of their ethical and moral backbones. Well, what ethical and moral backbones is this present regime, because that's all you can call it, operating in America right now? What is their moral backbone, apart from getting as rich as possible by whatever means, apart from supporting division, racial hatred, xenophobia, Islamophobia, far-right so-called Christianity. I think it's just when things seem at the worst possible, that's the point where things can start to get a lot better, because people suddenly wake up. They suddenly wake up to reality, to like, oh no, things have got so far out of line here, we're no longer heading to any recognisable place, except concentration camps for the poor. You know, and that is the concern. That is the concern. When you've got a leadership that's supporting the kind of things that Zionists are doing in Israel, when you've got a leadership that supports that, then they will support the same against citizens of America. And they will start with the poor, and then it will be the middle classes, and then it will be the, you know, start moving into the upper middle classes. You know, eventually you'll have 80%, you end up with 80% of the workforce literally living under a brutal dictatorship. And the choice is, you know, you either go along with that and get into the top 20%, or you're out with the 80% struggling on the bottom. And although even the affluent families of America now, like I say, they are struggling to find any security in the future. And so for the Ohio Supreme Court now saying that allows for voter purges is allowed, then this now is going to be widespread throughout the states. It's actually given a green light for even worse voter purges. So if there's another election and Trump wins the election, no, this just can't go on. The sham of democracy cannot go on. It just can't. There does come a choice where perhaps we do need to think, we need to stand against this. We need to stand up for our humanity. And if they're going to come at us and kill us because we are standing up for our humanity and our children's rights, well, let them do it. Okay? Let them do it. Because otherwise, our children have no future. They have no future. Where are we leading them to? What are we leading them into? The jaws of a monster. An unrepentant, unforgiving, ungracious, merciless, brutal, sadistic, criminal monster. That was why the Constitution was written in the first place, to keep those monsters at bay. So the Ohio Supreme Court now is an agent of tyranny. That's the way it is. It has to be an agent of tyranny, because it certainly isn't upholding the American Constitution, when it has been shown beyond all reasonable doubt that these voter purges have largely by majority removed people's lawful right to vote. People who have a right to vote, true American citizens who have a right to vote, they have been by overwhelming majority removed from the voting list through this voter purging. And that is a known, proven fact, as Greg Palast proves without doubt. So any court that could look at that evidence and yet still rule that that kind of purging is legal, that's not a court. That's not a court, that's a kangaroo court. That's a sham. That is an abuse of power, and the Ohio Supreme Court needs investigating. Because a society has no right to accept a ruling against their rights to democracy. Okay, that is not a democratic court. Who is that court serving? Is it just a Zionist court? And just briefly, you know, I want to touch on this. The Trump administration is gutting financial protections that will allow banks to steal from you. So basically, the institutions that are there to protect American citizens, you know, that regulate businesses and banks and things like this. Well, the Trump administration, because these are required by law, as Thom Hartmann explains here. You know, I'll leave you the link to these 2 videos. Do please listen to them. He explains it perfectly. But basically, these organisations that are there to oversee financial institutions and their activity on behalf of protecting consumers, okay, Trump's decided to give them 0 for their budget, okay, zero funds. So it's like, that's it. He's basically shut them down. So that's it. No protection for the people whatsoever. It's just corporations, bang, do whatever you want. Do your worst. Nobody's going to call you up. Nobody's going to oversee you. It doesn't matter what the public say. We can just ignore them. We can ignore them. We can stamp on them. So, you know, I promote socio-capitalism, which was the kind of what was tried to be established in Britain, though always under heavy attack and opposition from the right, so-called, who eventually succeeded in crushing the whole thing anyway with Margaret Thatcher, and also for years before that denying British industry any investment whatsoever. You know, these same banks who were quite happy to force governments to borrow trillions to invest in the criminal failing banks in the last few years. They couldn't spare $1 million to invest in upgrading Britain's nationalised industries. You know, they weren't prepared to part with any money for that. They're quite happy to part with 21 trillion to go in a black hole in the Pentagon budget. You see, this is the kind of world that conspires so they can turn round and say socialism doesn't work. Look at Cuba, how poor Cuba is. That's because they adopted socialism. No, it isn't. Cuba's that poor because the whole world conspired against them and refused to trade with them, prohibited trade with Cuba in order to make sure that they stayed poor. And yet, in spite of that, Cuba has one of the best health services in the world. And, you know, the people are well aware of what is going on, and they've stood by their leaders. Because they know what the alternative is. They'd still be living in the same poverty, except a small percentage of them would be, you know, swanning around with their obscene levels of wealth. But the fact is, socialism hasn't been allowed to succeed because the capitalists, corporate capitalists especially, have always conspired against it, and they've always had the power to. They've had the power. They've had military power, police power, government power. Socialism, on the other hand, has always been heavily oppressed, hasn't got anything like the same powers in police and military and government as traditionally this so-called far right has had. But the fact is, we do, you know, human beings are both socialist and capitalist. So, no, we can't abolish capitalism. We can't abolish socialism. We need them both to be working together. And that's what a socio-capitalist society does. It provides universal healthcare, education, social housing, welfare, social security, pensions, all at a basic rate, okay? And then there's private businesses, private enterprise allowed to continue alongside it. These corporations really are criminal. They are total monopolisation of productivity and even innovation, okay, to the extent that, you know, they favour certain innovations like the stuff they need for fracking, but at the same time they withhold investments into, you know, eco-friendly power, alternatives. They do their utmost to keep them on a back burner, so that, you know, they are actually holding humanity back. They claim that, you know, humanity is conspiring to hold them back. You know, that, oh, if you allow humanity through too much, you know, well, we won't be able to make all this progress. What progress? What progress? What progress have we made? How can you call losing the Pacific Ocean to 3 nuclear melt-throughs? How can we call that progress? How can we call what's happened to America progress? How can we call Israel and Palestine, what is going on there, the levels of hatred there, okay, and oppression and suffering? How can we call that progress? How can we call anything that's happened in Britain progress? It's been regress, 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 regress. Regression into what? Horror and hate and madness. And, you know, this voter purging, like I say, that this is outrageous. You know, when they talk about, you know, I've made a couple of videos about Maxine Waters, and she was described as outrageous because she, you know, said to people, tell these people, refuse to serve them, you know, because they're criminals. The kind of people that spread racist rhetoric, that would do such terrible things to children, they are criminals. And I made the comment under my recent video, you know, in the part here, you know, where something's written about the programme. I said, God bless America. A statement blithely repeated through time. God blesses those who bless the child. And that's the truth of it. God blesses those who bless the child. And one way of blessing a child is to make sure that child has parents that are capable, that are educated, that have a chance and an opportunity in life to make good, who have job opportunities, who have decent homes to live in, who have rights, who have justice, who have a true democracy and a financial system that isn't governed by a set of vicious viper sharks. Okay, so, you know, this God bless America, like I say, bless the child, and bless the people who stand up for our human rights, okay, and listen to them, listen to what they've got to say, listen to what Greg Palast says, and ask yourself, what kind of High Court judge could rule that legal? What kind of High Court judge of America, of all places, with its constitution, how could they rule that legal? What has been done that has robbed over 1 million people of their rights to vote and swung the election to allow this horror, unleash this horror into power in America? There's something wrong, people. As I say, internal tyranny. And it's time to call a spade and stand up to it, America. That is what your constitution is for. That is exactly what it is for. And every American citizen has a duty to uphold the constitution in the face of tyranny. Every single American citizen. That is your duty. Not to use colour of your skin, not to your ethnicity, not to your faith. First and foremost, every American citizen's duty is to uphold the Constitution. Where is it? Please extract it from the garbage, read it, stand by it, and even update it. So, yeah, I do say, God bless America, all the good people of America. Take strength, take courage. I have shared before my own experience of light being, and the message of universal law that arrived with it, I can say with absolute certainty, Jesus is with us. And that includes the Muslim people, the Jewish people, and even the atheists. And it is because Jesus is with us that, you know, we do have the capacity to forgive. We do have the capacity to offer amnesty to the people who are caught up at the moment in the kind of rhetoric that supports the horror that is happening right now. And, you know, all we can do, we can stand up for our rights, but we can offer that branch of amnesty and forgiveness to people who can extract themselves from the evils of that kind of consciousness that would rob people of votes, that would rob children of their rights, that would rob American citizens even of the very compassion that makes us a human being. So, love to all.